Nobody makes a wide toe box traditionally made work boot, so I made one with Jim Green because I want one, I need one, and I think there's a lot of people in the same boat as me that want the durability of a heritage boot, the comfort of a nice wide toe box, and at a price that you can actually justify investing in higher quality footwear for anything from a work boot, hiking, casual, everyday wear. So we're gonna cut this thing in half and run it through our test to really show you how we pulled off a wide toe box heritage boot under $300 and some of the compromises we had to make to get there. So what is this boot? Well, the brand is Anvil x Jim Green. It's a collaboration we did with them called the Rugged African Trooper, based off of the first release where we did the Barefoot African Trooper. They come in fudge, Houston brown, and Houston black. They weigh 2 pounds 5 ounces. They retail for $289. They're made in South Africa, and the way that we position this is basically the intro, a true heritage boot with a wide toe box that you can just about do anything in for under 300 bucks. If you do want a pair of these, check them out via links in my description. There's 2 batches coming in. The first batch, if you get your order in as soon as possible, you might get it before Christmas, but it might be a week or 2 after. Second batch is going to be delivered in January or February, so make sure you get your order in as soon as possible. There's a sizing guide below, and if they're completely sold out, just make sure you're on that limited edition email list below where you'll get early access, sizing guides, everything you need to know for the next drop, so you'd make sure you don't miss out on it, especially that early access that email list gets. So check all that out below. So now let's start going through the details of this boot, starting with the upper and the materials we use, because this is a pattern, like I said, we designed for the Barefoot African Troopers, and this was a lot more of an American style boot pattern compared to like what Jim Green usually does. It's a completely different style in South Africa, and so I wanted to infuse American boot style and pull in some Pacific Northwest, some Red Wing, some true American styling, and infusing it into the South African way of making boots. And we've taken it even further with this boot by flipping the leather in a more work boot way, instead of all of it being that smooth grain out in the high wear spots where you want that abrasion resistance and that durability of the rough outside. We flip those panels out, like the vamp, the heel counter, the backstay, like a true traditional work boot. And the leather we use is a regular Jim Green leather at 2.3 millimeters thick. It's a nubuck leather where they slightly buff the surface to give that kind of matte look to it. We burned it to see if there's any top coats or plastic. No evidence of that whatsoever. Looked at the cross section, plenty of grain still left in there. We did the puncture test. It took 115 pounds to puncture through in the top third of our results. And that's just the outer layer, because if you look at the inside, it's lined all the way up the shaft of the boot. The lining leather is 1.2 millimeters thick. So with that 2.3 millimeter outer leather and that 1.2 millimeter lining leather, that puts the total thickness to 3.5 millimeters. So that gets you way into the really thick and really dense work boot leather while still being somewhat flexible, because it is 2 layers. So there's gonna be some flaws and some pros associated with that. But I also wanted to add a little extra protection internally. And so we added an additional internal counter cover right at the heel where you really wear out your boots and your shoes, where all that heel slip happens. That internal patch is gonna help grip your heel because it's flesh out. It's also gonna add another layer of protection on top of it. There's like 8 layers of leather built up in there, because starting from the inside out, you have 2.3 millimeters, that internal counter cover, 1.2 millimeters of the lining, 2.3 of the quarter leather, and then 2.3 of this external counter cover as well. You end up with, without even the counter on the inside, 8 millimeters of leather just around your heel alone. And I'll show you why we did that when we get it cut in half. Then also on the inside of the boot, it comes with a removable insole with a little bit of closed cell foam underneath and a leather on top. And we designed our boot breakers to be able to fit in these boots. So if you buy a pair of these, we're gonna send you a pretty heavy discount code, so you can choose some leather boot breakers, the foam boot breakers, and customize it however you want, add some, subtract some, but it does come with these stock. But it's what's underneath that really matters, because this boot comes with a full length 5 millimeter Veg Tan insole. Not the removable insole, not this visible Veg Tan midsole that you see. It's a completely different leather that sandwiches that lining in between those 2 Veg Tan layers, locking it in place, giving you more leather to compress to give you that custom footprint inside your boot you can only get from this kind of boot. And for the actual wearer, on top of that footprint, you get the rigidity, you get more smell resistance, you get more durability, all the features that you get from a heritage boot. That's why we added that additional really thick Veg Tan insole in there. And like I mentioned, you've got a separate layer of that Veg Tan midsole running the full length, 4 to 5 millimeters thick, more rigidity, all that stuff we talked about. And it has this rubber slip sole that helps really adhere that rubber to the rest of the boot, because the way this boot is constructed has a double layer of 360 stitch down construction. And what that does is it locks in the upper, the lining, the midsole, and that slip sole all together in one big sewn together chunk. So in order for all those layers to fail, you'd have to wear through or break all that heavy stitching and the glue. And that's part of what makes these so easy to resole, because that stitching doesn't go through the sole. So when you do need to resole these, you just take it to a cobbler, they'll peel this one off, glue a new one on, and you're good to go. And even the outsole is something they've changed on Jim Green over the years, because this first Razorback that I was saying is a very similar build. This boot had that old outsole that was like 75 Shore, really tough, really hard underfoot. But after receiving a lot of feedback from customers, they went back and made a softer, more grippy compound. So instead of the 75 Shore, this is more of a 60 to 65 Shore. It's gonna be grippier, it's gonna give you more squish underfoot, Barefoot, more comfortable, but it's not gonna be quite as durable as a really hard rubber. But for me, I'm fine having a little bit extra squish, because this is still like significantly tougher and harder than even the Barefoot sole we put on these ones. And we did the bar drop test and it bounced up 6 1/3 inches, which is in the top third as well. And this is a crazy one. We did the puncture test. So all those layers with the rubber and the redundant Veg Tan layers and the outsole, the puncture test took 353 pounds to puncture through. That's the #4 result of all time. And so now let's cut this thing in half and I'll show you why it got such a crazy score, some of the compromises we had to make, and really how we made the first true heritage work boot under 300 bucks with the wide toe box. Got it cut in half, and if you're not subscribed, consider doing it, and thank you guys for supporting these collaborations. It's a huge part of how we're able to buy brand new stuff every single week to just destroy, to show you what you're buying, but also it's a big part of how we're gonna be able to do the next couple steps in the business, because as soon as we hit that 1,000,000 subscriber mark, we're announcing the 3 or 4 like big things that we're doing that are all thanks to your guys' support and these brands that are willing to do these collaborations to make stuff that you and I want that nobody makes, and that's super fun to do, so thank you guys. Now let's see what's inside. Oh! Now, let's see what's inside. So now you can see all those Veg Tan layers we talked about. You can see that steel shank that's in there to give you that support over the instep, especially for work and hiking. And you can see how that insole locks in that lining that's wrapped underneath, and that makes that fully lined boot possible, which is super important for this heel area I was gonna tell you about, because how many layers was it? 1, 2, it's like 4 layers of leather, making about 8 millimeters of leather buildup, because it's really, really tough to source Veg Tan in South Africa, but especially heel counter Veg Tan. It's just, they don't have it. And so we have to use the regular Jim Green counter in order to build up all that support and that locking in and the shaping of the shape of your foot. That's why we did 4 separate layers wrapping around your heel, giving you 8 millimeters of leather to break in, to grip that heel as you're working, as you're hiking, as you're using the boots. And you can see how we flipped this panel to be flesh out, we flipped this panel to be flesh out, but the parts that you don't want a little bit of grip and you want to be able to easily put your foot in and slip it out, we left the grain out. And it's also super different from the Barefoot African Trooper, that even though it's the same pattern and it's still Rose Anvil Jim Green collaboration, it's almost a completely different boot. And if you want to see a more in-depth breakdown of this over like 20 minutes on Rose Anvil 2 tomorrow, I'm dropping an in-depth comparison of the Barefoot African Troopers versus the rugged African Troopers. So all that combined, now that you've seen all the different layers and everything, that's how we made the first really wide toe box, traditionally made work boot under 300 bucks. And if you want to pair these, be sure to check them out via links in my description, the sizing guide, the unboxing, all that information's there. So the sooner you order, the sooner you'll get your boots, and hopefully you'll be in that first batch. But if you missed out on both batches, make sure you're on that limited edition email list below, because that's how you get early access. That's how you get notified when the next drop is. Huge shout out to Jim Green for willing to let us just go so deep on this pattern. We designed this pattern over like 12 different iterations, tweaking it little bit by little bit until it was absolutely perfect. And it was so fun to be able to make an actual product that I think has been needed in the market, that I want, that you want, that nobody's making. Because it's one thing to design a product and a collaboration, but it's a completely other thing when it's something that people actually need to do their job, to make their feet feel better, to make them feel less sore at the end of the day, because nobody's making it. And so doing something like that is really cool. It's really meaningful, and it's only possible because of your guys' support and because of Jim Green. So thank you guys for all your support and everything you do. See ya.